The flour sack hit the wooden table with a soft thump, and Katherine Shaw's hands trembled slightly as she pushed it toward the mill owner. Her green eyes filled with something that looked like relief mixed with exhaustion. Montana territory stretched wild and unforgiving beyond the small settlement of Wilson, and the autumn of 1878 had brought hardships that tested even the strongest souls. The mill stood at the edge of town, a sturdy wooden structure that creaked and groaned as the water wheel turned steadily in the rushing creek, and inside, Marcus Thorne looked up from his ledger with surprise etched across his weathered face. "Madam." His voice carried the rough edges of a man who spent more time talking to horses than people, but there was kindness there too, buried beneath years of solitude. Katherine steadied herself against the table, her brown calico dress dusty from the long ride. "I came to return what my husband borrowed. 3 months ago, before the fever took him, he borrowed 20 pounds of flour from you, and I have come to make it right." Marcus set down his pen slowly, studying the woman before him. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and freckles scattered across her nose like stars. Her hands bore the rough calluses of hard work, and her dress, though clean, had been mended in several places. He was 30 himself, and in those 8 years between them lay a lifetime of difference, yet he found himself unable to look away from the determination in her eyes. "Your husband passed?" Marcus asked gently, already knowing the answer. News traveled slowly in Montana territory, but it traveled eventually. The fever that swept through the valley had claimed 14 souls that summer, leaving widows and orphans in its wake, 3 weeks ago. Her voice remained steady, though Marcus noticed how her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. "Benjamin Shaw. He worked the land 5 miles north of here, near Copper Creek. We only settled there last spring, came out from Ohio with such hopes." She paused, swallowing hard. "The crop failed when he got sick. Could not tend it proper. But I sold what we had, our plow, some tools, and I worked as a seamstress in town. This flour represents that debt paid in full." Marcus moved around the table, his boots heavy on the worn floorboards. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of hauling grain sacks, with dark hair that fell slightly too long around his collar and brown eyes that held more loneliness than any man should carry. The mill had been his whole world for 5 years, ever since he bought it with money saved from cattle drives and breaking horses. It provided a living, but it was a solitary existence. "Mrs. Shaw, I do not recall your husband borrowing any flour from me." Katherine's face flushed with frustration. "Please, Mr. Thorne, I know he did. He told me so before he passed, made me promise to settle all debts. He was an honest man, and I aim to honor that." "I am not doubting your word, madam, but truly, I have no record of it, and I keep careful books." Marcus gestured toward the ledger, its pages filled with neat columns of numbers and names. "Perhaps he got the flour elsewhere." He specifically said the mill. "Your mill." Katherine's voice cracked slightly, the first sign that her composure was fraying. "I have spent weeks scraping together the means to repay this debt. Please, just accept it. I cannot rest knowing I owe something to someone." Marcus looked at the flour, then back at her face, seeing the pride and desperation warring there. He understood debt, understood the weight it could place on a soul. But he also understood that this woman had sacrificed much to bring something that perhaps had never been owed. She stood before him with nothing but her word and her determination, and something in his chest tightened at the sight. "Mrs. Shaw, please sit down." He pulled out a chair, one of only 2 in the small office area of the mill. "Let us talk about this properly." She hesitated, then sat, her back straight despite the exhaustion that clearly pulled at her. Marcus took the other chair, turning it to face her rather than hiding behind the desk. "I believe that you believe your husband owed this debt," he began carefully. "But I am telling you true, there is no record of it. Now, I could simply accept this flower and send you on your way, but that would sit wrong with me, taking something I am not owed. However, I have a proposition for you if you will hear it." Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly with suspicion. She had learned in her short widowhood that men often made propositions that served only themselves. "What kind of proposition?" "I need help at the mill. My last assistant left 2 months back to try his luck at the mining camps up north. The work is constant, and I cannot manage it all alone. The grinding, the bookkeeping, dealing with customers, maintaining the equipment. I am looking for someone capable and honest. The wages would be fair, and there is a small cabin out back that comes with the position. It is not much, just 2 rooms and a fireplace, but it is sound and dry." "You are offering me employment," Catherine's voice carried disbelief. "I am offering you a way forward, one that does not require you to give up what you have already sacrificed so much to obtain. Keep your flower. Come work for me instead, and we will call any debt, real or imagined, settled." Katherine stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I do not need charity, Mr. Thorne." Marcus rose as well, holding up his hands. "It is not charity, Mrs. Shaw. I genuinely need the help. Ask anyone in Wilson. They will tell you I have been searching for an assistant for weeks. You would be doing me the service, not the other way around." She studied his face, looking for deception and finding only earnestness. The mill's water wheel continued its steady rhythm outside, a sound that had become such a part of Marcus's life he barely heard it anymore, but to Katherine, it sounded almost like a heartbeat, steady and sure. "I know how to read and write and cipher," she said finally. "I kept the books for my father's dry goods store back in Ohio before I married, and I am not afraid of hard work." "Then you are exactly what I need." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of a tightness he had not even realized was there. The mill had been empty of human warmth for so long, just the endless routine of grain and flour and the occasional customer's brief conversation. Katherine picked up the flour sack, cradling it against her chest. "I will need to think on this. It is not a decision to be made lightly." "Of course. Take all the time you need. But Mrs. Shaw, one thing I would ask. Where are you staying now?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation Marcus saw the truth. "You have nowhere to go, do you?" "I have been staying in the back room of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, working for my keep by cleaning and helping with the cooking. It is temporary until I figure out my next steps." Catherine's chin lifted defiantly. "I am not destitute, Mr. Thorne. I simply find myself in transition." "Then make the transition here. The cabin is empty. Even if you decide not to work for me, you could stay there temporarily. No obligation." Marcus surprised himself with the offer. He was not typically an impulsive man, but something about Katherine Shaw called to a part of him that had been dormant for years. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me." Marcus considered the question carefully. Outside, a customer's wagon rattled up to the mill's main entrance, and he knew he would need to attend to them soon, but this conversation felt more important than any business transaction. "My mother died when I was 16, he said quietly. "My father followed her 6 months later, some said from a broken heart, though I suspect it was more likely the pneumonia. I was left alone to figure out the world, and I made a lot of mistakes. But there were people along the way who showed me kindness when they did not have to. I learned that sometimes we help people not because we expect anything in return, but because it is the right thing to do. And because loneliness is a heavy burden, one that is easier to bear when we look out for each other." Catherine's eyes softened, and for the first time since she entered the mill, her rigid posture relaxed slightly. "I will think on your offer, Mr. Thorne. Truly I will. That is all I ask." The cabin is the small building behind the mill, the one with the blue door. The key is hanging on a nail just inside the main entrance here. If you decide you want to see it, help yourself. No need to ask permission. The customer outside called out, and Marcus excused himself to attend to the business of grinding wheat into flour. Katherine watched him go, observing how he moved with confident efficiency, greeting the farmer with genuine warmth. She clutched the flour sack and slipped out of the mill, but instead of heading back toward town, her feet carried her around the building to where the small cabin stood. It was humble, as Marcus had said, built from rough-hewn logs chinked with mud and moss. But the roof looked solid, and someone had planted wildflowers along the front, though they had grown wild and unkempt without tending. Katherine peered through the wavy glass window and saw a simple interior. A stone fireplace, a small table, 2 chairs, a rope bed in the corner that would need a mattress, shelves built into the walls. She thought about the crowded boarding house where she currently slept on a thin pallet in a room shared with 2 other women. She thought about the endless days of not knowing what would come next, of watching her small savings dwindle. She thought about the land she had tried to maintain after Benjamin died, only to realize she could not work it alone, could not pay the land fees, could not make it produce anything before winter came. And she thought about Marcus Thorne's eyes, how they held no judgment, no pity, just a straightforward decency that seemed rare in this hard country. The decision crystallized in her mind with surprising clarity. She returned to the mill's office and retrieved the key from where Marcus had indicated. When she came back around to the cabin and unlocked the blue door, dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the windows. The place smelled unused but not neglected, as if someone had cared for it once and simply stopped. Katherine set her flour sack down on the table and looked around her potential new home. It was not what she had dreamed of when she and Benjamin headed west full of hope and ambition. But dreams changed, and sometimes survival was its own kind of triumph. She spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, finding a broom in the corner and sweeping away months of accumulated dust and dirt. She discovered a well out back with clear, cold water and used it to scrub down the table and shelves. Someone had left behind a few basic supplies: a dented kettle, some tin plates, a lantern with a bit of oil still in it. When Marcus finished with the late afternoon customers and closed up the mill's main operations, he found Katherine hauling armfuls of dried grass to stuff into a mattress tick she had apparently found in a storage shed. "Mrs. Shaw." He stood in the doorway of the cabin, uncertain. She turned, her face flushed from exertion, and for a moment, Marcus forgot to breathe. With her hair coming loose from its bun and her sleeves rolled up, she looked vibrant and alive in a way that made the cabin seem less empty. "I am taking the job, Mr. Thorne. And the cabin. If the offer still stands, it does. Absolutely." Marcus felt a smile spread across his face, genuine and unguarded. "When do you want to start? Is tomorrow too soon?" "Tomorrow is perfect." They stood there in the doorway as the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and pink. The moment stretched between them, filled with the weight of a decision made and a future undefined. "I should go collect my things from the boarding house," Katherine said finally. "It is not much, but I have a few dresses and my sewing kit and some personal items. I can hitch up the wagon and drive you if you like. It will be easier than carrying everything." Katherine hesitated, then nodded. "That would be kind of you. Thank you." The drive into Wilson took only 15 minutes along the rutted dirt road. The settlement was small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, the boarding house, and a handful of other businesses. Perhaps 60 families lived in the immediate area, with scattered homesteads and ranches spreading out into the surrounding valleys. Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner, was a stout woman with iron-gray hair and a perpetual expression of disapproval. She met them at the door with arms crossed over her ample bosom. "Mrs. Shaw, you said you would be staying through the month. I am counting on that income." "I will pay you for the full month, Mrs. Patterson, as agreed. I am simply collecting my belongings to move to new lodgings." Catherine's voice remained polite but firm. New lodgings. Where might that be? The older woman's eyes flicked to Marcus, and her expression grew even more sour. "You are not moving in with a man, are you? Your husband barely cold in the ground." Marcus felt anger flare in his chest, but Katherine spoke before he could. "I am taking employment at the mill, and housing comes with the position. It is a completely proper arrangement, and frankly, Mrs. Patterson, my choices are no longer your concern once I have settled my account with you." "Employment at the mill," Mrs. Patterson sniffed. "We will see how proper that remains. A young widow and a bachelor working in close quarters. People will talk." "People always talk," Marcus said quietly. "Usually because their own lives are not interesting enough. Mrs. Shaw is my employee, and she will be treated with respect, by me and by everyone else. I will make sure of that." They collected Catherine's belongings, which fit into a single worn carpetbag and a small trunk that had seen better days. As they loaded them into the wagon, Katherine remained silent, her jaw tight. Once they were rolling back toward the mill, Marcus glanced over at her. "I apologize for Mrs. Patterson's rudeness." "You have nothing to apologize for. She is not wrong that people will talk. A widow working for a bachelor living on his property. It will raise eyebrows." "Does that trouble you?" Katherine was quiet for a moment, watching the landscape roll by. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out. "I am troubled by many things, Mr. Thorne, but the opinions of gossips are not high on that list. I need work, I need a roof over my head, and you have offered both with no strings attached. That makes you either a saint or a fool, and I am not going to question which." Marcus laughed, a sound that surprised them both. "I have been called many things, Mrs. Shaw, but neither saint nor fool topped the list. I am just a man trying to run a mill and maybe do some good in the world while I am at it. You can call me Katherine. If we are going to be working together, formality seems unnecessary." "Then you should call me Marcus." "Marcus." She tested the name, and he liked the way it sounded in her voice. "Tell me about the mill. How long have you owned it?" "5 years come spring." "I bought it from the original owner, a German fellow named Schmidt who wanted to retire and move to California to be near his daughter. Before that, I worked cattle drives, breaking horses, whatever jobs I could find. Saved every penny. The mill is not glamorous work, but it is steady and there is satisfaction in it. People need flour for bread, and I provide that. It is simple but necessary." "Nothing wrong with simple and necessary. The world runs on such things." Katherine shifted in the wagon seat. "What about family? You mentioned your parents passed when you were young. Do you have siblings?" "A sister, married and living in Denver. We write occasionally, but we are not close. She married a banker and has little use for her brother who runs a mill in Montana Territory. What about you?" "Any family besides your late husband? My parents are both living back in Ohio, 2 younger brothers. I should write and tell them about Benjamin." Katherine's voice caught slightly. "I have been putting it off. It makes it so final, putting it in a letter." Marcus wanted to reach over and take her hand to offer comfort, but it seemed too forward. They barely knew each other after all. Instead, he said, grief is a strange thing. It does not follow rules or timelines. You will write when you are ready. They arrived back at the mill as full darkness settled over the land. Marcus helped Katherine carry her belongings into the cabin, then lit the lantern and started a fire in the fireplace. The flames quickly chased away the evening chill, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "I will leave you to settle in," Marcus said, lingering at the door. "If you need anything, my quarters are in the loft above the mill's main floor. Just knock on the door. I am usually up by 5 to start the day's operations, but there is no rush for you tomorrow. Take the morning to get properly moved in and come find me when you are ready to start learning the work. 5 it is then. I am accustomed to early mornings." Katherine stood in the middle of her new home, looking small but determined in the flickering firelight. "Marcus, thank you for all of this. I do not entirely understand why you are being so kind to me, but I am grateful nonetheless." "Maybe I am just tired of being lonely," Marcus said, surprising himself with the honesty. "Good night, Katherine. Good night." Marcus crossed the yard to the mill, climbed the exterior stairs to his loft, and lay awake for a long time, listening to the familiar sounds of the water wheel and the creek, and wondering what he had set in motion by inviting Katherine Shaw into his orderly, solitary life. In the cabin, Katherine unpacked her few belongings, made up the bed with the straw-stuffed mattress and the quilt she had brought, and sat at the small table with her husband's Bible open before her. She traced the inscription on the first page, Benjamin's name written in his mother's careful script, and let herself cry for the first time since his funeral. She cried for the dreams that had died with him, for the loneliness of widowhood, for the fear of an uncertain future. And when the tears finally stopped, she closed the Bible, washed her face with cold water from the well, and climbed into bed determined that tomorrow would be the first day of whatever came next. The rooster crowing from a neighboring homestead woke Katherine before dawn. She dressed quickly in her sturdiest dress, braided her hair in a practical plait, and made her way across the yard to the mill. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, painting everything in shades of gray. The mill's main door was open, and Katherine could hear the rumble of the grinding stones already in operation. She followed the sound and found Marcus directing the grain flow, his sleeves rolled up and flour dust already coating his arms. "You are early," he called over the noise of the machinery. "I like that in an employee. You said 5. It is 5. Katherine looked around at the impressive operation. The water wheel outside drove a system of gears and shafts that powered the massive millstones. Grain funneled down from hoppers above, was ground between the stones, and emerged as flour that was collected in cloth sacks below. First lesson: never get your hands or clothing near the moving parts. This equipment is powerful and unforgiving. People have lost fingers, even hands, from carelessness. Marcus demonstrated the safe way to guide grain into the hoppers and how to adjust the stone's distance to control the flour's fineness. The art is in knowing your grain. Wheat, corn, rye, they all grind differently. Too coarse and people complain. Too fine and you lose efficiency. Katherine watched carefully, asking questions when she did not understand. Marcus proved to be a patient teacher, explaining each step thoroughly. As the sun rose fully, casting golden light through the mill's windows, the first customers of the day began to arrive. Mrs. Shaw. Old Mr. Henderson did a double take when he saw Katherine weighing out flour. "Did not expect to see you here." "I am working for Mr. Thorne now," Katherine said pleasantly, recording his purchase in the ledger exactly as Marcus had shown her. "Working for him, eh? That is good, good. You need something steady after what happened to Benjamin. Terrible thing, that fever." Henderson collected his flour and left, but not before Katherine saw him glance between her and Marcus with undisguised curiosity. By mid-morning, half the town probably knew that Katherine Shaw was working at the mill. By afternoon, the other half would know too, along with various embellishments and speculations. "You were right about people talking," Marcus said during a brief lull in customers. "Henderson will have it all over Wilson by noon. Let them talk. I have work to do." Katherine was elbow-deep in accounting, reconciling the previous month's records with surprising efficiency. "Marcus, did you know you undercharged the church by $2 last month, did I?" He came to look over her shoulder at the numbers. "You are right. I am better with the grinding than the bookkeeping." "Well, now you have me for that." Katherine made a note to adjust the next billing. "This is good work, Marcus, honest work. You should be proud of what you have built here." Something in her voice made Marcus look at her more closely. But what? You said it like there was a but coming." Katherine set down her pen. "No, but just observation. You have built something good here, but you have built it alone. Why is that? A man like you with a thriving business and property, I would have expected you to have a wife, a family." Marcus leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "I suppose I never found the right person. Or maybe the right person never found me. This is isolated country and the mill keeps me busy. There are not many opportunities to meet people, and most of the eligible women in Wilson are either too young or already spoken for." He paused. "What about you and your husband? You said you came out from Ohio. That is a long way. What drew you west?" "Benjamin's dreams," Katherine said softly. "He wanted land of his own, a fresh start. He had such grand plans. We were going to build a ranch, raise cattle, maybe have children who would grow up in wide, open country instead of cramped city streets. I wanted to make him happy, so I came along, even though I was terrified of leaving everything familiar behind." "Did you love him?" The question was forward, probably inappropriate, but Katherine answered honestly. "I cared for him deeply. He was kind to me, respectful. But we married quickly, barely knew each other. My parents approved because he was hardworking and seemed responsible. I thought love would grow over time, and maybe it would have if we had been given more time. I am sorry you did not get that chance. So am I, but I cannot change it. I can only move forward." Katherine returned her attention to the ledgers, clearly signaling that the personal conversation was over. They worked side by side through the rest of the day, falling into an easy rhythm. Marcus handled the physical labor of grinding while Katherine managed the business side, greeting customers, recording transactions, and organizing the chaotic system of IOUs and credit that had accumulated under Marcus's lenient management. "You need to collect on some of these debts," Katherine said firmly that evening as they closed up for the day. "The Morrison family has owed you for 6 months. That is not sustainable. The Morrisons have 8 children and barely scrape by as it is. I am not going to press them when they are struggling to feed their family. That is very noble, but you also need to eat and keep the mill running. There has to be a middle ground." Katherine studied the accounts. "What if we arrange payment plans? Small amounts they can manage, but consistent. It gives them dignity while ensuring you eventually receive what you are owed." Marcus considered this. "That seems fair. You have a good head for business, Katherine. My father used to say that kindness and good business are not mutually exclusive. You just have to be creative about finding the balance." As the days turned into weeks, Katherine settled into her new life at the mill. She transformed the cabin into a real home, adding small touches like curtains made from fabric scraps and wildflowers on the table. She organized the mill's chaotic records into a proper system, collected on old debts using a combination of firmness and compassion, and proved to be better at handling difficult customers than Marcus had ever been. More importantly, she and Marcus developed a friendship built on mutual respect and easy companionship. They shared meals, with Katherine cooking in her cabin and Marcus bringing bread and sometimes meat from the butcher in town. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their observations about the people who came through the mill. Marcus found himself looking forward to each morning, to the sound of Katherine's footsteps crossing the yard, to the way she hummed while she worked, to her quick laugh when he made a joke. The mill, which had always been just a business, began to feel like something more. It felt like a home. Katherine felt the change too, though she tried to ignore it at first. It seemed too soon, too improper to develop feelings for someone when Benjamin had been dead less than 2 months. But she could not deny that Marcus made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since leaving Ohio. He was steady and kind, with a quiet strength that did not need to prove itself. And the way he looked at her sometimes, with a mixture of wonder and tenderness, made her heart beat faster despite her best intentions to remain detached. The first snow came in late November, dusting the mountains white and bringing a bite to the air that promised a hard winter ahead. Marcus was teaching Katherine how to adjust the millstones, standing close behind her to guide her hands on the controls when she suddenly turned, and they were face to face, barely a breath apart. "Marcus," she whispered, and something in her voice made his heart stutter. "Katherine." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with infinite gentleness. "Tell me to stop, and I will." Instead of speaking, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When they opened again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I do not know if this is right," she said. "Benjamin has not even been gone 3 months. People will say terrible things. They will say I did not love him, that I am disrespecting his memory. You care what they say. I care what I think of myself. I care that I am not the kind of woman who forgets her husband so quickly." Marcus let his hand fall away, stepping back to give her space. "You are not forgetting him, Katherine. You are choosing to keep living. There is a difference. Is there? It feels the same sometimes." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But I cannot deny that I feel something when I am with you. Something that I am not sure I even felt with Benjamin, and that makes me feel guilty all over again." "What do you feel?" Marcus needed to hear it, even though he could see it in her eyes. "Safe. Seen. Like I matter to someone, not just as a wife or a worker, but as myself." Katherine met his gaze. "And more than that, things I should not be feeling yet. There is no timeline for healing, no rule book that says when it is acceptable to feel happiness again." Marcus kept his voice gentle. "But I will not press you, Katherine. If you need time, I will give you time. If you need space, I will give you space. Whatever you need, I am here." Katherine crossed the distance between them and rested her head against his chest, just for a moment, letting herself draw strength from his solid presence. "Thank you for being patient with me." Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding her loosely, ready to let go the instant she pulled away. "I have waited 30 years to feel what I feel when I am with you. I can wait a little longer." They stood like that in the mill, surrounded by the familiar smells of grain and flour, the sound of the water wheel turning steadily outside, and neither spoke about what had passed between them. But something had shifted, an acknowledgement of feelings that could not be unspoken. Winter deepened, bringing storms that sometimes closed the road to Wilson for days at a time. During one such storm, Katherine and Marcus found themselves snowed in together, unable to work because no customers could reach the mill. They spent the day in Katherine's cabin, keeping the fire high and playing cards with a battered deck Marcus retrieved from his loft. "Where did you learn to play poker?" Marcus asked as Katherine won yet another hand. My brothers taught me. They thought it was hilarious to teach their little sister to gamble. My mother was horrified when she found out. Katherine collected her winnings, a pile of dried beans they were using as chips. I am very good at reading people. It is all about watching faces, seeing the tells. What does my face tell you? Katherine studied him across the small table. That you are happy right now in this moment. That you are usually lonely but trying not to be. That you care about me more than you are willing to say. She paused. And that you are letting me win because you think it will make me happy. Marcus laughed, caught. Am I that transparent? Only to someone who is paying attention. Katherine's expression grew serious. I am paying attention, Marcus, to all of it. And what do you see? A good man. Maybe the best man I have ever known. She reached across the table and took his hand. I am not ready to call this what it is yet. But I want you to know that I am moving toward ready, slowly but surely. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Then I will keep waiting, slowly but surely. The storm passed, the roads cleared, and life at the mill resumed its normal rhythm. But something had changed between them, a deepening of their connection that was obvious to anyone who looked. Mrs. Patterson made pointed comments when Katherine came to town for supplies. The minister's wife gave her a lecture about propriety and the appearance of impropriety. Even old man Henderson felt compelled to offer his unsolicited opinion on the matter. You need to think about your reputation, he told Katherine one day at the mill. A young widow living on a bachelor's property, spending all day every day with him. People are starting to talk. People started talking the day I moved into the cabin, Mr. Henderson. I am not doing anything improper, and neither is Marcus. We are both adults, both working hard to make an honest living. If people choose to see scandal where there is none, that says more about them than it does about us. Maybe so, but in a small town like Wilson, reputation matters. You might want to think about making things more proper-like. Katherine knew what he meant. Marriage. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. After Henderson left, she sat at her desk in the mill office, staring at the accounts but not really seeing them. Marcus found her there an hour later, still lost in thought. Henderson said something to you. He said what everyone is thinking. That we should marry to make our situation more respectable. And what do you think about that? Katherine set down her pen carefully. I think that marriage for the sake of appearances is a terrible reason to marry. I also think that I am falling in love with you, Marcus Thorne, and that terrifies me more than anything else. Marcus pulled up a chair beside her, sitting so they were eye to eye. Why does it terrify you? Because I lost Benjamin, and it almost broke me. Because loving someone means risking that kind of pain again. Because it has only been 4 months, and I worry that I am not giving myself enough time to grieve properly, that I am rushing into something because I am scared to be alone. Katherine's voice shook slightly. What if I am just looking for security, not love? What if I am using you to avoid dealing with my loss? Are you? No. The answer came quickly, without hesitation. No, what I feel for you is real. It is different from what I felt for Benjamin. Deeper, somehow, even though we have known each other for a shorter time. With Benjamin, everything was proper and planned. We courted, we married, we followed all the rules. With you, everything is unexpected and overwhelming and absolutely right in a way I cannot explain. Marcus took her hands in his. Then forget about Henderson and Mrs. Patterson and everyone else in Wilson. Forget about timelines and propriety and what you are supposed to feel. Just tell me what you want. Katherine looked into his brown eyes and saw her future there, clearer than she had ever seen it before. I want to build something with you, not because it is proper, but because I cannot imagine not being with you. I want to wake up every morning and know that you are there. I want to work beside you and laugh with you and face whatever comes with you." She paused, gathering courage. "I want to love you openly without guilt or shame, but I do not know if I am ready for that yet." "Then we will take it at your pace. We do not have to rush anything." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I am not going anywhere, Katherine. When you are ready, truly ready, I will be here." Christmas came, bringing with it a brief thaw and a flurry of activity as people prepared for the holiday. Katherine accepted an invitation to Christmas dinner at the home of one of their customers, a kind woman named Sarah Mitchell who ran the general store with her husband. Marcus was invited too, and they went together, driving into Wilson in Marcus's wagon. The Mitchell home was warm and welcoming, filled with the smells of roasting turkey and fresh bread. There were a dozen people there, families from the area gathering to celebrate. Katherine found herself enjoying the company, the laughter, the sense of community. And she enjoyed watching Marcus interact with others, seeing how he was respected and liked, how he had a kind word for everyone. After dinner, while the men smoked pipes outside and the women cleaned up, Sarah pulled Katherine aside. "You and Marcus make a handsome couple," she said without preamble. "Do not listen to the gossips. Anyone with eyes can see that you two care for each other genuinely." "It is complicated," Katherine said, "with Benjamin's death still so recent. Life is complicated. Love does not follow convenient timelines." Sarah dried a dish carefully. "My first husband died young too, trampled by a horse when I was just 21. I thought I would never love again. But then I met Robert, and I learned that the heart is more resilient than we give it credit for. You can honor Benjamin's memory while still choosing happiness for yourself. The two things are not mutually exclusive." That is what Marcus says. Then Marcus is a wise man. "Do not let fear rob you of something good, Katherine. We get so few chances at happiness in this life. Take them when they come." The words stayed with Katherine as they drove home through the cold winter night, the wagon rattling over frozen ruts. Marcus had wrapped her in blankets, and she sat close beside him for warmth, watching the stars overhead. "Marcus," she said softly. "Yes." "I am ready." He glanced at her, uncertain what she meant. Ready for what? To stop waiting, to stop feeling guilty, to stop caring what other people think. Katherine turned to face him. "I am ready to be happy with you if you will still have me." Marcus pulled the wagon to a halt right there in the middle of the road. He turned to her, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. "Katherine Shaw, I have been yours since the moment you walked into my mill with that flour sack. I will have you any way you will let me." She kissed him then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Katherine laughed with pure joy. "Take me home, Marcus, and do not let me go." "Never," he promised. "I will never let you go." They married in January. A simple ceremony in the small church in Wilson with Sarah Mitchell and her husband standing as witnesses. Katherine wore her best dress, not black mourning but a deep blue that brought out her eyes, and Marcus wore his Sunday suit, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. The minister's wife sniffed disapprovingly through the whole service, but Katherine did not care. She spoke her vows with a full heart, meaning every word. When Marcus kissed her as his wife, the mill's community erupted in genuine applause. Not everyone approved, but enough people did, and those who mattered stood by them. The wedding breakfast was held at the mill, with Katherine having prepared an impressive feast despite her limited resources. People from the surrounding homesteads came, bringing dishes and gifts. Old man Henderson gave them a proper set of dishes. The Morrisons, that family with 8 children who Marcus had been so lenient with, brought a beautiful quilt made by Mrs. Morrison's own hands. Even Mrs. Patterson came, though she remained tight-lipped and disapproving throughout. As the afternoon wore on and the guests gradually departed, Katherine found herself alone with Marcus in the cabin that was now truly theirs together. He had moved his belongings down from the loft above the mill, and they had rearranged the space to accommodate both of them. Mrs. Thorne, Marcus said, testing out her new name. How does that feel, Strange? Good, right? Katherine came to stand before him, suddenly nervous despite everything they had shared. I want to be a good wife to you, Marcus. You already are. He drew her close. Katherine, I need you to understand something. I am not expecting you to be anything other than who you are. I did not marry you because I needed a housekeeper or a bookkeeper or someone to cook my meals. I married you because I love you, completely and without reservation. Whatever comes, we will face it together. I love you too, Katherine said, and it was the truth. She loved this man who had shown her such kindness, who had been patient with her grief, who saw her not as a convenient solution to loneliness but as a partner in every sense of the word. Their first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet, a joining that felt both natural and profound. Afterwards, lying in Marcus's arms with the firelight casting shadows on the walls, Katherine felt at peace for the first time since Benjamin's death. Maybe longer than that. What are you thinking? Marcus asked, running his fingers through her loose hair. That I am happy, truly, genuinely happy. I did not think I would feel this way again. You deserve happiness, Katherine. You deserve all the good things life can offer, so do you. She kissed his chest, right over his heart. Thank you for giving me a second chance at life. Thank you for giving me a first chance at love. The winter passed in a blur of work and companionship. Katherine and Marcus ran the mill together, a true partnership in every way. She handled the business operations while he managed the grinding, but they helped each other with everything, working side by side through long days. In the evenings, they would return to their cabin, cook dinner together, talk about their day, make plans for the future. Marcus taught Katherine to fish in the creek when the ice broke up in early spring. Katherine taught Marcus to dance, humming waltzes while they spun around the small cabin. They laughed more than Katherine had known was possible, finding joy in small things. A particularly beautiful sunset, a customer's funny story, a successful day of grinding, but they also faced hardships together. A late spring storm damaged part of the mill's water wheel, requiring extensive repairs that ate into their savings. A brief illness left Katherine weak and shaky for weeks. The Mitchells' eldest son was killed in a ranching accident, and they grieved with the family. Through it all, their love deepened. Marcus learned Katherine's moods, knew when she needed comfort and when she needed space. Katherine learned Marcus's silences, understood the weight he sometimes carried from his own losses. They built a life together, piece by piece, day by day. By summer, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for weeks but waited until she was certain before telling Marcus. She chose a warm July evening when they were sitting outside the cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. Marcus, I have something to tell you. He turned from watching the sky to look at her face, and something in her expression made him go very still. What is it? We are going to have a baby. In late winter, I think, maybe early March. Marcus's face went through a series of emotions, shock, disbelief, and then pure, undiluted joy. He pulled Katherine into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. A baby, Katherine, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy? She asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic. He pulled back to look at her. How are you feeling? Are you well? Do you need to rest more? Should you stop working at the mill? Katherine laughed at his sudden overflow of concern. I am pregnant, not dying. I feel perfectly fine, just a bit tired in the mornings. And I will keep working as long as I am able. Women have been having babies and working for thousands of years, Marcus. I am not going to suddenly become fragile. But Marcus fussed over her nonetheless, insisting she not lift heavy things, making sure she ate well, worrying over every small complaint. Katherine found it both endearing and exasperating, but she could not deny that she loved being cherished so thoroughly. As her belly grew round with their child, the people of Wilson softened toward them. Even Mrs. Patterson congratulated Katherine when she saw her in town, though the congratulations came with a lecture about proper prenatal care. The coming baby seemed to legitimize their relationship in a way the wedding had not, proof that theirs was a real marriage, not just a convenience. Marcus began working on a cradle in the evenings, carving elaborate designs into the wood with surprising skill. Katherine sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small a newborn must be to fit into such garments. They argued happily about names, unable to agree but enjoying the discussion nonetheless. "If it is a boy, I want to name him after my father," Marcus said. "Michael Thorne." "That has a nice sound to it," Katherine considered. "And if it is a girl, you should choose then. Whatever name means something to you." Katherine thought about it for days before deciding. "Sarah, after Mrs. Mitchell. She was kind to me when I needed it most, and I would like to honor that." "Sarah Thorne." Marcus tried it out. Perfect. Winter came again, and with it, Katherine's time drew near. A midwife named Mrs. Henley, who lived 3 miles up the valley, came to stay in the cabin as Katherine's due date approached. She was a practical, no-nonsense woman who had delivered half the babies in the territory and inspired confidence with her competence. "First babies are unpredictable," she told Marcus. "Could come early, could come late, could be quick, could take all day and night. Best thing you can do is stay calm and let me do my job." Marcus tried to stay calm, but as Katherine began having pains on a cold February morning, his composure crumbled. He paced the cabin like a caged animal while Mrs. Henley barked orders at him. "Mr. Thorne, if you cannot be useful, get out. You are making my patient nervous with all that pacing." Katherine, despite her pain, managed to laugh. "Marcus, go check on the mill. Make sure everything is secure. I will be fine. I am not leaving you. You are not doing me any good standing there looking terrified either." Katherine squeezed his hand through another contraction. "Please, it will make me feel better knowing the mill is taken care of." Reluctantly, Marcus went to check the mill, though he returned every half hour to see how things were progressing. The labor was long, lasting through the day and into the night. By the time Mrs. Henley finally announced that the baby was coming soon, Marcus was nearly beside himself with worry. "Let him stay," Katherine panted. "I want him here." So Marcus held Katherine's hand while she pushed, whispering encouragement, marveling at her strength. And when their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Marcus found himself weeping without shame. "A boy, Mrs. Henley announced, briskly cleaning the baby and wrapping him in a blanket before placing him in Katherine's arms. "A good size, healthy lungs. You did well, Mrs. Thorne." Katherine cradled the tiny infant, all written across her exhausted face. "Michael, our Michael." Marcus touched his son's impossibly small hand, watched those tiny fingers curl around his much larger one, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Hello, Michael. Welcome to the world, son." The baby had Marcus's dark hair and Katherine's nose, and though his eyes were the unfocused blue of all newborns, Katherine swore they would turn brown like his father's. He was perfect and terrifying and absolutely theirs. Those first weeks were exhausting in ways neither Marcus nor Katherine had anticipated. Michael was a good baby, but he still needed to be fed every few hours, day and night. Katherine was sore and healing, and Marcus took over most of the mill work alone while she recovered. They moved through those early days in a haze of sleeplessness and wonder, learning to be parents on the job, but they also discovered new depths to their love. Katherine watched Marcus gentle their fussy son at 3 in the morning, singing off key lullabies, and fell in love with him all over again. Marcus watched Katherine nurse their child, the tender expression on her face, and felt gratitude so profound it threatened to overwhelm him. Spring brought easier days. Katherine healed and regained her strength, and Michael settled into a more predictable routine. They brought his cradle into the mill office so Katherine could return to helping with the business while keeping the baby close. Customers delighted in seeing the infant, bringing small gifts and offering advice, wanted or not. Sarah Mitchell became a frequent visitor, having taken on the role of honorary grandmother since neither Katherine nor Marcus had family nearby. She taught Katherine tricks for soothing a colicky baby, shared hand-me-down clothes from her own grown children, and provided a sympathetic ear when Katherine felt overwhelmed. "Being a mother is the hardest thing you will ever do," Sarah told her one afternoon while they watched Michael sleep. "But also the most rewarding. Just wait until he starts talking and walking. That is when the real adventure begins." The real adventure began sooner than Katherine expected. Michael proved to be a curious, active baby who started crawling at 6 months and walking at 9. By his first birthday, he was into everything, keeping both parents constantly on their toes. "He has your stubbornness," Marcus told Katherine after retrieving Michael from behind a sack of grain for the 3rd time that morning. "And your determination," Katherine countered, watching their son immediately head back toward the forbidden area. "This is going to be an interesting few years." They were right. Michael grew into a bright, energetic toddler who kept the mill lively with his presence. Marcus built him a small rocking horse, which quickly became his favorite toy. Katherine made him clothes and tried to keep him clean, a losing battle when he insisted on playing in the flour dust. But it was a happy chaos, the kind that comes from a home filled with love. The mill prospered under Marcus and Katherine's joint management. They saved enough to make improvements: new grinding stones, repairs to the building, even a proper barn for Marcus's horse and the wagon. Word spread about the quality of their flour and the fairness of their dealings. Customers came from farther away, sometimes traveling for hours to do business at Thorne's mill, as everyone had taken to calling it. Marcus hired a young man named Timothy to help with the heavy work, giving him room and board in the loft above the mill. 2 years after Michael's birth, Katherine found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Marcus still fussed, but Katherine was better at ignoring his overprotectiveness. Their daughter Sarah arrived on a warm September evening, smaller than Michael had been but just as healthy. She had Katherine's auburn hair and green eyes, and from the start, she was a quieter, more contemplative baby than her brother had been. "She is studying everything," Marcus observed when Sarah was just a few weeks old. "Look at how she watches." It was true. Where Michael had been all movement and noise, Sarah was observational and calm. As she grew, the difference between the siblings became even more apparent. Michael was always running, climbing, getting into mischief. Sarah was content to sit quietly with a picture book or watch her father work at the mill. "We got one of each," Katherine said to Marcus when the children were 2 and 4. "A wild one and a gentle one." "They balance each other out," Marcus replied, watching Michael try to teach Sarah to climb a tree while she patiently explained why that seemed like a bad idea. "And they are both perfect." The years rolled by in a steady progression of seasons and milestones. Michael started helping at the mill as soon as he was big enough to be useful, shadowing his father everywhere. Sarah showed an aptitude for numbers and began helping Katherine with the accounts when she was just 6 years old. The cabin became too small for their growing family, so Marcus built an addition, 2 more bedrooms and a larger main room. He did most of the work himself, with Timothy's help and occasional assistance from neighbors who came to raise the walls. It was not fancy, but it was solid and comfortable, a real home. Katherine planted a garden, growing vegetables and herbs that supplemented their diet and saved money. She also started taking in sewing work again, making clothes for people in Wilson and the surrounding area. Not because they needed the money, but because she enjoyed the work and liked staying connected to the community. Marcus served on the school board once Wilson finally got a proper school built. He donated generously to the construction and made sure both Michael and Sarah attended regularly. Education was important to him, the key to opportunities he had never had. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised Katherine with a trip to Denver. They left the children with Sarah Mitchell and took the train, staying in a real hotel and eating in restaurants. It was the first time they had been away from the mill and the children, and while they missed them terribly, it was also wonderful to simply be Marcus and Katherine again, not just parents and business partners. You remember when you walked into the mill with that flour sack? Marcus asked one evening as they sat in a Denver restaurant overlooking the street. How could I forget? I was so determined to pay off a debt that probably never existed. Benjamin must have been confused in his fever, or maybe he borrowed from someone else and I misunderstood. Katherine smiled at the memory, but I am glad for the confusion. Otherwise, I might never have met you. I knew the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life. I just did not realize how completely. Marcus reached across the table to take her hand. You gave me everything, Katherine. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just grinding flour. You gave me love when I had forgotten what that felt like. You saved me, Katherine said softly. I was drowning in grief and uncertainty, and you threw me a lifeline. You gave me a reason to keep going when I did not think I had one. And you loved me when I did not think I deserved to be loved again. You always deserved it. You always will. They returned from Denver renewed and refreshed, ready to tackle whatever came next. What came next was another pregnancy, unexpected but welcome. Katherine was 35, and while the pregnancy was harder on her body than the previous 2 had been, she delivered a healthy baby boy they named James. James was a surprise in every way, coming 8 years after Sarah, and thoroughly disrupting the routine they had established. But he was also a blessing, bringing new life and laughter into a household that had grown perhaps too settled. We are starting all over again, Katherine said ruefully as she walked the floor with a crying James at 2 in the morning. I had forgotten how exhausting newborns are. Marcus took the baby from her, tucking him against his shoulder. Go back to bed, I have got him. You have to work tomorrow, so do you. We will share the load like we always have. Michael and Sarah adored their baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him. Michael, now 12, took his role as big brother very seriously, while 10-year-old Sarah appointed herself James's personal protector. The years continued their march. Michael grew into a strong young man who took over more and more of the mill's physical operations. He had inherited his father's height and build, and his mother's quick mind for business. At 18, he started courting a girl from Wilson, the daughter of the new doctor who had moved to town. Sarah proved to be brilliant with numbers and systems, and by age 16, she was essentially running the business side of the mill. She had expanded their operations, establishing contracts with larger buyers in Helena and even as far as Butt. The mill that Marcus had run alone had become a true family enterprise. James, growing up with the mill as his playground, showed an aptitude for mechanics and engineering. By age 10, he was improving the mill's operations, designing new systems for more efficient grain handling. Marcus encouraged this interest, bringing home books on engineering from his trips to larger towns. Katherine, now in her mid-40s, had silver threads running through her auburn hair, but she was as energetic as ever. She had expanded her role in the community, serving on the church ladies' auxiliary and organizing charity drives for families in need. The opinions that had once judged her so harshly now sought her counsel and respected her position. Marcus, approaching 50, still ran the mill with the same steady dedication he always had. His hair was more gray than brown now, and his face bore lines carved by years of sun and hard work, but his eyes still lit up every time Katherine entered a room. His love for her had not diminished with time. If anything, it had grown deeper, more certain. On their 20th anniversary, the entire community threw them a celebration. The church hall was packed with people whose lives had been touched by the Thornes' generosity and fair dealing. There were speeches and toasts, and Marcus and Katherine danced to a fiddle band while their children and neighbors looked on. 20 years, Katherine said as they swayed to the music. It feels like both forever and no time at all. Do you have any regrets? Marcus asked. Katherine looked up at him, this man who had given her everything, who had been patient with her grief, who had loved her through good times and hard times. Not a single one. You, Marcus Thorne, are the best decision I ever made. Even better than returning that flower, she laughed. Especially better than returning that flower. As they grew older, Marcus and Katherine gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the mill, letting their children take over more responsibility. Michael married his sweetheart, and they built a house near the mill, staying close to the family business. Sarah, to everyone's surprise, became engaged to a lawyer from Helena, a match that combined her business acumen with his legal expertise. James, at 17, was accepted to an engineering program at a university in the East. Marcus and Katherine were proud but also sad to see him go, knowing that the wider world called to him in a way it had never called to his siblings. They sent him off with their blessing and enough money to see him through his studies. The mill continued to prosper, now run primarily by Michael, with Sarah handling the business side from Helena, where she had moved after her marriage. They had done well by their parents' legacy, growing the operation while maintaining the values of fairness and community service that Marcus and Katherine had instilled. Marcus and Katherine, now in their 60s, lived quietly in the cabin that had been expanded and improved over the years, but remained fundamentally the same structure where they had begun their life together. They took walks along the creek, tended their garden, and spoiled their grandchildren, of which there were now 6, with more likely on the way. "You remember being lonely?" Katherine asked Marcus one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. It was the same view they had watched countless times over the decades, but it never grew old. "I remember," Marcus said. "It feels like a different lifetime, like that was a different person. You gave me a second chance at life when I did not think I would survive losing the first one. I walked into your mill to return borrowed flour, and you gave me everything." Katherine took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "You were the one who gave me everything. I was just a lonely cowboy running a mill, going through the motions of living without really being alive. Then you walked in, and suddenly everything had color and purpose and meaning." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips. You made me believe in love, Katherine. Real, lasting, forever love. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Inside, they could hear the sounds of Michael's family visiting for dinner, the laughter of grandchildren playing, the normal chaos of a house filled with life and love. "We built something good here," Katherine said softly. "Not just the mill, but a family, a legacy. Our children are happy and successful. Our grandchildren are healthy. We have been blessed beyond measure." "We have," Marcus agreed. "And it all started with you having the courage to walk through that door, determined to pay a debt that did not exist." Katherine laughed. "Divine intervention, do you think? Benjamin's fever dreams leading me exactly where I needed to be, maybe. Or maybe just the universe making sure two lonely people found each other." Marcus pulled her closer. "Either way, I am grateful. Every single day I am grateful." They were married for 43 years before Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. Katherine was devastated by the loss, but she was not destroyed by it the way she had been by Benjamin's death all those years ago. She had been given decades of love and partnership, and she held those memories close as she grieved. She lived another 7 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had inherited the mill and expanded it beyond anything Marcus and Katherine could have imagined. On her deathbed, at the age of 79, Katherine called her children to her side. "I want to tell you about the day I met your father," she said, her voice weak but clear. "I walked into that mill carrying a sack of flour, determined to pay a debt. I was alone and scared and did not know how I was going to survive. And your father, this man who owed me nothing, who had every reason to turn me away, gave me everything. He gave me work and shelter and patience and love. He gave me all of you. Michael, now 53 and running the mill with the same dedication his father had, held his mother's hand. You gave him everything too, Ma. He told me once that he had been just going through the motions before you came along. You gave his life meaning." "We gave each other meaning," Katherine said. "That is what love does. It transforms ordinary lives into something extraordinary. Never forget that. Build your lives on love and everything else will follow." She closed her eyes then, a smile on her face, and slipped away peacefully. They buried her next to Marcus in the little cemetery outside Wilson, under a granite stone that read, "Katherine Shaw Thorne, beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She came to return borrowed flour and found love instead. The mill continued for generations, always staying in the Thorne family, always maintaining the values that Marcus and Katherine had established. Their story became local legend, told and retold, embellished over the years but never losing its essential truth. That love can be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness matters more than propriety, and that sometimes the debts we think we owe lead us exactly where we are meant to be. In Wilson, Montana, if you ask the old-timers about Thorne's Mill, they will tell you about Marcus and Katherine. They will tell you how a lonely cowboy and a determined widow found each other and built something lasting. They will tell you that true love is not about grand gestures or perfect timing, but about two people choosing each other every single day, through hardship and joy, through ordinary moments and extraordinary ones. And if you visit the mill, still operating after more than 150 years, you can see their legacy in every carefully ground sack of flour, in every fair transaction, in every kindness extended to a customer in need. The building has been updated and modernized, but the original grinding stones are still there, retired now but preserved as a reminder of where it all began. On the wall of the mill's office hangs a framed photograph, sepia-toned and fading with age. It shows Marcus and Katherine on their 25th anniversary, standing in front of the mill, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Marcus's arm is around Catherine's waist, and they are both smiling, truly smiling, with the kind of joy that only comes from a life well lived and deeply loved. Beneath the photograph is a small placard with a quote Katherine gave to a newspaper reporter who interviewed them for their anniversary. It reads, "I came to return borrowed flour, carrying my grief and my pride. He gave me a mill and his devotion, and together we built a life richer than any I could have imagined. Love found me when I was not looking for it, and that made it all the sweeter." The story of Marcus Thorne and Katherine Shaw is a testament to the transforming power of love, the importance of kindness, and the truth that sometimes our greatest blessings come from our darkest moments. They found each other in a time and place that was unforgiving, where survival itself was often uncertain. Yet they did more than survive. They thrived, built, loved, and left behind a legacy that continues to touch lives more than a century after they first met. In the end, that is what love does. It takes two separate lives and weaves them into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have been alone. It creates ripples that extend far beyond the original two hearts, touching children and grandchildren and entire communities. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, it starts with something as simple as a woman walking into a mill, carrying a sack of flour, and a lonely cowboy deciding to give her not just what she came for, but everything he had to offer.